Where are we headed now, darling?
The Arizona sun beat the desert like a hammer on an anvil when he found her. She lay half buried in dust beside a dying yucca, dress ripped, knuckles raw, a blood-smeared scrap clenched in her fist. The giant cowboy reined in hard. Folks called him Bear Dalton, 6'7" of quiet strength, shoulders like barn doors, arms corded from years breaking broncs and hauling rails. He swung down from his tall, dun horse and knelt, shadow swallowing her small frame. "Ma'am," he rumbled, voice low as distant thunder. Her cracked lips moved. "Don't let them take it." The note slipped free, stiff with blood. Bear unfolded it, careful with those impossible hands, expecting a plea for water or mercy. Instead, a single line punched straight through his iron composure. "The marshal you trust killed my husband. Meet me at Devil's Needle by sundown, or the child dies." The name beneath it turned his stomach to ice. It was signed by a dead man he'd buried himself, and stamped with the private cattle brand Bear had burned into wood the day his ranch house went up in flames. As the words bled in the heat, the giant cowboy's face turned pale. Someone had framed him, resurrected ghosts, and stolen a child to draw him out. He lifted the woman into his arms. Whatever waited at Devil's Needle, he was riding into it. The woman weighed less than a saddle blanket in Bear's arms, all sharp bones and grit, the heat coming off her skin like a stove door left open. He eased her across the dun's neck, slipped his canteen to her lips, and counted 3 careful swallows with a patience that seemed at odds with his size. "No more," he said, corking it. "Slow, or it comes back up." His voice had a way of making orders feel like shelter. The desert stretched in every direction, a scalded pan of thorn and stone. Shimmering distance made liars of the mountains. But the landmark he needed was honest as a blade. The Needle, a volcanic spire that stabbed the sky to the east, throwing a long shadow the old-timer swore could point a man to fortune or ruin when it crossed the right canyon. Bear had seen men die chasing that shadow. Today, it was the only promise he had. He swung into the saddle behind the woman, braced her with one arm, and clucked the gelding forward. The horse moved like a river over rock, ears twitching to the flies, sweat darkening its withers. Bear set a steady pace that would eat miles without eating the horse. The sun leaned heavier. Heat came up off the ground in waves, carrying the taste of alkali and iron. At a low wash, he reined in, slid down, and worked with the economy of a man who'd done this too often. Soaked a cloth, laid it along the woman's neck, opened her cracked knuckles one by one to free the note without tearing it further. Blood had glued the fold into a stiff seam. He breathed out, slow, easing it open. The handwriting was a scrawl, but the message was clean as a knife wound. "Marshal Clay Harker killed my husband to steal the herd. He wears your brand like a trophy. Devil's Needle by sundown, or the boy dies. Harker." The name put winter under Bear's ribs despite the oven air. He saw again the night his ranch house burned bright enough to stay in the stars, men silhouetted on the ridge, a badge glinting as if law could sanctify theft. He'd carved a cross into raw earth over what was left of his foreman 2 days later, and ridden out with nothing but horse, rope, and the kind of quiet you carry after everything else is gone. He'd never said the marshal's name out loud since. "A thing loses teeth when spoken," his father used to say. Harker's name still had fangs. "Don't!" The woman's voice scratched like thorns. "Don't trust!" Her eyes fluttered and rolled white. Bear pressed the damp rag back to her lips. "Hush now." He looked at the sky, one hand over his brow, gauging the slope of light. 4 hours to the Needle if the horse held and the heat didn't break them. Less if he cut through Devil's Wash, more if the wash was dry as bone and sand sunk. He weighed water against time. He weighed the woman's pulse against the boy in the note. His jaw set. He laid the note flat inside his vest, close to his heart, where he could feel its edges cut with each breath. Then he lashed his canteen to the saddle horn, where he could reach it fast and mount it. The gelding picked up again, hooves whispering through brittle grass and powder. 2 miles on, the women came around proper, a jolt of pain in her eyes that said the world had returned unwelcome. She tried to sit. Bear's arms cinched like a band of iron. Easy. Name, she whispered. Bear. He almost never gave it. The truth passed between them like shade. Rosa, she said and coughed. He tipped the canteen, 2 swallows. The third he took himself, barely a rinse across his tongue before he spat it out for the dust to eat. She watched him like a parched animal measures a creek, hope and suspicion both. They took Eli, she managed, my boy. Said the marshal wanted leverage. Tears brightened the dust at the corners of her eyes but didn't fall. Made me write you, made me put your brand on it, said the giant would come. Then he guessed right, Bear said. The desert rolled under them. Vultures clocked slow circles high and lazy, waiting for an end that would not be theirs today. The needle drew taller, its black tooth breaking the blue. Heat shimmered around it like a veil. Bear steered for a gap in the low ridges to make a line the old ranch maps in his head said would cut an hour. He spotted a sign at the mouth of the gap. 4 shod mounts, moving quick, 1 mule dragging. The prints were fresh enough to hold edges, too many for Rosa alone. He swung down without slowing the horse to study the story the ground told. The mule had the steady pull of weight, kegs, a trunk, or a child in a crate. His hands made small, exact calculations in air, measuring distances with fingers that others mistook for clubs. They wanted to be seen, he said, and they wanted me to know they were heavy. Rosa's breath hitched. Trap? Likely, Bear said, and swung back up. We'll spring it careful. They ate the next miles without speaking much. Bear watched the sun and the ground and the corners where a man can disappear. Twice he cut sign where riders had doubled back to check their tail. Twice he adjusted pace and line, refusing the hurry his blood wanted, giving the ambush nothing but dust. At last, the needle loomed sheer, a blade cast up from the earth, its shadow sliding long into a tangle of chaparral and basalt. He reined in behind a basalt fan, slid Rosa down, and tied the dun end tight where a stray bullet wouldn't find him. The air here felt different, a hum under the heat, like old stories breathing. Bear's father would have made a sign against it. Bear made sure his Colts were clean and his rifle oiled instead. You stay behind the stone, he told Rosa, tucking her into a notch with a water skin and his second knife. If I don't come back, you ride west at dusk. Keep to the washes. Don't light a fire for 3 nights. I won't leave if... You will, he said, and gentled the words with a touch to her shoulder. Your boy needs one of us alive, even if it ain't me. Her mouth trembled, the first crack in a wall she'd kept high, and then she nodded once, the kind of nod a person makes when surrendering to trust, because the other options are worse. Bear stepped into the open with his empty hands visible and his shadow long before him. Harker! His voice rolled off the rock. You wanted the giant? You got him. Silence held a second, then broke with a laugh that had law in it like a stain. A man stepped from behind a juniper, hat brim low, badge shining nice as a silver dollar. 2 riflemen rose from stone like lizards, and somewhere a child sobbed, small, high, close. Marshal, Bear said, face unreadable. Dalton. Harker smiled like a churchman at collection time. Always wanted you under the needle. Pretty, ain't it? Thought you'd appreciate the scenery before I hang your name on something proper." Bear didn't look at the rifles. He looked only at the marshal's eyes and the thing that moved behind them. "You got my note." "I did," Bear said, "and I brought what you really wanted." Harker cocked his head. "Oh? Me?" Bear's big hands opened, empty, palms forward, a gesture of peace that only a fool would mistake for surrender. The child cried again, closer now, behind a wall of stacked crates and a tarp. Rosa's breath scraped in the notch behind him. Bear took one step, then another. The rifles tightened. He stopped where a man stands when he wants to be heard by everyone in a circle. "Let the boy go," he said. "You got my attention." Harker's smile held. "Not yet. First, we talk old business." "Talk fast," Bear said. "The sun's going." The marshal flicked two fingers. One rifleman kicked a crate, revealing a small boy bound at wrists and ankles, eyes too wide in a dust-smudged face. "Sundown, like the note promised," Harker said. "I'm a man of my word." "Your word's a rope," Bear said softly. Something passed across Harker's face then. Annoyance, maybe, that his script wasn't being read right. "You cost me a herd, Dalton." "You stole one," Bear said. Harker's smile cooled. "Truth's what men with badges make it." He nodded to the rifles. "Giant or not, you'll step into these irons, and the boy lives to see morning. Or you try your strength, and the boy's blood is on your hands." Bear breathed once, deep, like a smith bellowing a coal. He thought of his father's saying about names and teeth. He thought of Rosa's cracked lips saying, "Don't let them take it." He thought of the way the needle's shadow slid, pointing. "It's on yours already," he said, and moved. He didn't go for his gun. He went for the ground, one palm scooping a plate of dust and grit that he flung up like a curtain into Harker's face. The marshal cursed, staggered, and Bear's right Colt cleared leather with a speed that made a lie of his size. The first rifleman fired wild, the second flinched. Bear's bullet found the first man's shoulder, spinning him to the dirt. The second went for cover. Rosa's knife flashed from the notch, kissing a forearm and changing his mind about aiming. The child screamed. Harker came up shooting blind, 2 rounds sparking stone near Bear's hip. Bear flowed sideways, big as he was, like a man who had learned years ago that size is only a story you sell to fools. He shot the marshal's gun hand, not to end him, not yet, but to erase options. The pistol flew. Harker howled. Bear was on him then, the shadow of him swallowing the badge. "Truth," Bear said, voice so low it shook dust. "Say it now." Harker's teeth showed. "You won't shoot me," he panted. "You need me to unhook the boy." "Maybe," Bear said, and the way he said it made even the rocks listen. Behind them, the wounded rifleman crawled toward the boy with a knife between his teeth. Rosa cried out. Bear turned his head a fraction, and that was all it took for a second set of boots to crunch behind him where there had been no one a heartbeat before. "Careful where you look, giant," a new voice drawled. "Devil's Needle has more than one shadow." The words slid cold along Bear's spine. He knew that voice, too. He didn't turn all the way. He watched Harker's eyes instead, and saw them flick to the right, to a man stepping out of the sun with Bear's old brand burned into his vest like a joke. "Miss me, boss?" the man said. Bear's face went pale again. As the sun kisses the needle and the shadows twist, the man Bear buried walks out of the light with the boy's life in his hands. Bear's boots splayed wide in the Devil's Needle dust, one hand steady around the butt of his Colt, the other knuckles ghost white at his side. The world constricted to the clearing, the needle spire throwing its slant shadow. Rosa's gasp hissing from the rocks, Harker's badge glinting, and in the sunset orange, Jeb Fallon, who by all justice ought to be 6 feet down and feeding worms. But Jeb was there, alive, a burned patch of Bear's own cattle brand gleaming like a scar on his filthy vest. "Long time," Jeb said, mouth twisted. "Heard you been looking for me, Bear. Figured I'd make it easy." Bear absorbed everything. The position of the rifles, the set of Harker's jaw, the tremor in the boy's tied hands. At another moment, he would have spoken slow and low, let his shadow do the persuading. But shock ran in his blood now, a chill that prickled the back of his neck, an old ache he thought buried with Jeb. "I buried you myself after the barn," Bear said, voice low and flat. Jeb grinned wider, yellow teeth flashing. "Couldn't dig deep enough, boss. You always did half a job." Harker barked a laugh, swinging his revolver to tap the air. "Enough. You want to hear the next part, Dalton, or you want to see your blood on the stones? We got no appetite here for cowboy nostalgia." Bear's thoughts whipped through options. 2 rifles to his left, Harker center, Jeb right. Rosa out of direct line, the boy at Jeb's elbow. Sun behind the needle, blinding one rifleman at least another few minutes. Let the boy go wouldn't work, not now. So he played the only card left, arrogance. "Heard you were clever, Harker," Bear said slow. "But bringing a dead man, that's just old bad luck hunting you." A flicker of discomfort crossed the marshal's face, but it was gone quick. "Jeb's worth more to me above ground. And as for you, your value's in how loud a giant can beg when he's brought to his knees." Jeb produced a huge Bowie knife, spinning it easy. "Heard you don't cry. That's what this is about. Show the territory you ain't a legend, just big and slow." Rosa's voice, barely a hiss, wafted from her hiding place. "Don't listen, Bear. Don't give them the spectacle." But Bear's focus was razor fine now. His whole life on ranches and rails had taught him what panic cost. A slip, a twitch, someone innocent bleeding out. He centered his breathing, let the weathered grip of his Colt and the ache in his left shoulder anchor him now. Harker motioned to the rifleman. "Tie him." Jeb grinned but looked over at Harker. "Why not let the big man have a go? I want to see if muscle means anything near the needle." The marshal paused, a show of power, Bear realized, for both of them. He straightened up to his full looming height. "I don't run," he said. Rifles came in. 2 men, both lean, both nervy, one limping. Bear's sharp eye counted every hesitation in their steps. The first circled left, rifle pointing at Bear's belly. The second keeping to Jeb's right, but closer to the kid. Bear let them close. He only needed a breath, a mistake. Close now. Bear dropped to one knee as if surrendering his height, hands slow to his head. As the first man came to bind him, Bear surged up in a coiling motion, huge arms catching the man at the waist, swinging him around as a shield. The second rifle barked too late, slug thudding harmlessly into his comrade's back as Bear flung the first man at Jeb like a sack of grain. Jeb ducked, cursing, knife slashing air as the boy tumbled sideways. Bear's coat cleared leather, roaring out twice. One shot shattered the second rifle's shoulder. The other carved a chunk off the crate, spitting splinters near the boy's feet. Harker fired wildly, but missed. Bear closed the distance fast, faster than any man his size should. He tackled the marshal to the dirt, gun clattering away. They rolled, fists and knees, Harker landing a wild punch that split Bear's brow. Blood dripped into his eye. He blinked it away, roared, and pressed the lawman's head into the gravel until the badge snapped off its pin. He didn't finish it. Jeb's boots thundered behind. The bowie knifed in low, catching Bear high in the back. Thin line of fire. Bear gasped, lurching to his feet, grappling with the dead man returned. Jeb was strong for his frame, but Bear's arms were iron. They crashed into the needle's shadow, rolling in the dust, until Bear's monstrous hands closed around Jeb's wrist, crushing down until the knife dropped. Not far away, the boy was free, staring wide-eyed at the carnage, untied by Rosa, who crawled to his side and shielded him with her own body. "Go," she said. "Run for the horses." Jeb, breathing hard, spat blood into the sand and managed, "Not bad, boss, but you can't protect everyone." Bear panted, jaw working. "You're right." A shot split the air. The limping rifleman, wounded, had mustered a last aim at the escaping boy. Bear heaved Jeb aside and took the bullet in the thigh. The force knocked him back, staggered but upright. The rifleman slumped over, out of cartridges, going limp. The pause after was deafening. Rosa sobbed in gratitude, pulling Eli close behind a boulder. Harker, face bloodied, scrambled up, drawing a hidden derringer. Bear, wounded, lifted his Colt. Faster! It was a standoff in song, the giant bleeding, the marshal trembling, Jeb watching for his moment. Bear spoke, voice rough, every inch of him defiant and alive. "This is what you wanted, Harker? The legend as flesh, as meat, as a man that would take a bullet to give a child a chance?" Harker's lips curled. "No, I want you, Dust." He fired. Bear fired. The thunder echoed once, then twice. Both men fell to their knees, Harker howling, wrist shattered by Bear's shot, the derringer spinning away. Jeb advanced, picking up the dropped bowie. "You're out, Bear. You can't stop me now." But the boy, Eli, scrambled up onto the rock, tossed something down. Bear's rope, coiled and ready. Bear, grit and muscle and agony, caught the rope in one massive hand, lashed it forward, a whip-crack motion, looped it around Jeb's ankles. With a titanic pull, he yanked Jeb off balance, sending him crashing hard to the ground. Bear staggered to Rosa and Eli, one arm useless, the other bloody. Jeb groaned about 10 feet off, pinned by Bear's best throw. Harker lay sobbing over his ruined hand. Bear turned to Rosa, voice softer than sunlight now. "You two get on that dun and ride west. Don't look back till you hit water. Nothing here for you. This is my fight now." But Rosa clutched his forearm, tears and grit streaking her face. "We're not leaving you. I said I'd repay your kindness. Let us stand with you." Bear staggered, stunned not by pain, but by the first warmth he'd felt in years. "Then let's end it together," he said, fierce pride in his broken voice. As the desert shadows lengthen and the needle glows blood red, a battered Bear, Rosa, and Eli prepare to face Jeb's final trick, and the coming storm that will test if even the strongest cowboy has a right to hope. The canyons around Devil's Needle loomed like ancient sentinels, jagged walls of red rock that narrowed the trail into a labyrinth. Bear Dalton's massive frame moved with surprising grace as he guided his horse Dusty through the narrow passages. Rosa sat astride her own mount, clutching baby Eli tightly against her chest. The desert sun beat unrelenting as the wind carried restless whispers. The hunt was far from over. The previous skirmish had taken its toll. Bear's arm throbbed from a fresh cut. His breath was ragged with exhaustion, but his focus was razor sharp. He scanned every ridge, every ledge, alert to the sudden rustle of boots or the telltale glint of sun on metal. Warriors loyal to Chief Ronton would not relent easily. Rosa's dark eyes, fierce and unyielding even in weariness, cast a worn but determined glance at Bear. "They follow us still. We can't rest long." Bear nodded grimly, the weight of responsibility heavier than any rifle slung at his side. "We make camp deep in the canyon, where no horse follows without risking its own death." Their small caravan wound deeper, kicking up clouds of dust that settled like a blanket over the leafless creosote bushes. Eli stirred inside his makeshift sling, his innocent blue eyes wide in the harsh light. Bear's broad hands brushed Rosa's shoulder, a rare gesture of gentleness from the giant man. "How did it come to this?" Rosa whispered, voice raw from months of running. "I was only protecting him, and now it's war." Bear's lips twitched with a shadow of a smile. "War finds those who stand for what's right," he replied softly, "and we're still standing." That night found them huddled beneath a high rock overhang. Bear constructed crude defenses, sharp stakes hidden in the sandy soil, piles of stones stacked as makeshift walls. Rosa tended to Eli, rocking the child with a lullaby learned from her mother. The real battle began before dawn. Drums pounded in the distance, echoes of a wild war dance. Warriors crept through the shadows, their silhouettes ghost-like under the waning moon. Then came a sudden flash, arrows streaking toward the camp, hissing deadly in the cold air. Bear was already moving, a mountain incarnate with fists and fury. He caught arrows mid-flight, shoving Rosa and Eli behind cover. The canyon erupted into a chaos of yells, hooves thundering, the clash of leather and steel. Rosa fought like a cornered cougar, knife flashing as she defended her son. Bear's fists smashed skulls and jaws. His rifle barked with deadly accuracy. Each moment was a blur, a dance between life and death, shield and blade. In the swirling melee, Bear caught sight of Ronton, tall and painted for war, rallying his warriors with a savage cry. The chief's eyes locked on Rosa, full of ancient wrath. Bear squared his shoulders, a living wall between fury and fragility. The final clash of fists was thunderous, Bear throwing the chief against stone with a roar that echoed the canyon wind. Yet the fight was far from over. Ronton's warriors fell back, wounded but unbroken, while Bear's side counted their losses. After the harrowing battle, silence fell, broken only by Eli's soft coo and the groans of the wounded. Bear tore a strip from his shirt to bandage Rosa's bleeding leg. Their hands met in a lingering touch, a fragile thread of humanity in the merciless desert. "I thought we'd lose everything," she murmured. Bear shook his head, eyes fierce. "We have each other. That's a start." As dawn bled into daybreak, the sky blazed with fire. Hope rose amid ruin, and between scars, a love forged in the fury of survival. Their path forward was uncertain, but neither would walk it alone. They venture on, hearts bound, as shadows loom larger and foes close in. Each step a test of courage, each breath a promise to protect the unbreakable bond between Bear, Rosa, and baby Eli. The final pursuit leads the trio to an abandoned fort where secrets unravel and the true power of love is tested in a desperate, fiery showdown. The broken walls of the old fort rose up like ghostly fingers against the dusty sky, a shadow of former glory etched with centuries of forgotten battles. It was the only refuge Bear could find, a skeletal structure clinging to the rocky outcrop, far from prying eyes and easy pursuit. The air was crisp now, cooled by the night's chill, but Bear's blood still burned in his veins. They entered the courtyard cautiously. Dust swirled in thin spirals, catching fading sunlight and dusting the worn flagstone with a golden haze. Bear set about barricading the gates with rusted wagon wheels, torn canvas, and jagged stones from the embankment, all under Rosa's tired but watchful gaze. The fort was a maze of crumbling chambers and hollowed walls, places to hide or die. His wounds throbbed with each heartbeat, a cruel reminder that he was mortal, despite his towering frame and the legends whispered among the trails. Rosa knelt by the makeshift bed, gently swaddling Eli with her worn shawl, whispering ancient lullabies in a language Bear had never heard, songs that held the desert's mystery. They ate sparingly, spoons scraping dry tin plates. The fragility of the moment weighed heavily. The enemy was relentless and their numbers small. As night deepened and stars pricked the black canopy, Bear lit the last lantern, its flickering flame casting wavering shadows on the adobe walls. Sitting beside Rosa, Bear found his voice rough but steady. "I thought I buried my past alongside my kin. Turns out, some things don't die easy." Rosa's fingers traced lazy patterns on Eli's blankets. "We all carry ghosts. Harder for some, but out here, beneath this vast sky, maybe we find peace." Bear's eyes softened, the tough exterior melting in the warm silence between them. He reached for Rosa's hand, their fingers intertwining like rope knots, strong yet pliable. But peace would not last. The dawn chorus heralded the coming storm. Hoofbeats thundered across the plain, the ground trembling with mounting fury. The courtyard buzzed with unrest as Bear and Rosa scrambled to their posts, arrows perched on ledges, rifles sighted through embrasures. From the horizon rose a cloud of dust, Marshal Mallory's cavalry, bolstered by a contingent of miners and mercenaries. Beside them, war paint gleamed on the faces of Ron's warriors, led by his ruthless lieutenant. Bear's gaze hardened. This is it, their last stand before the fort. Rosa gripped her knife, eyes flashing fire. "Then we bleed or break it." The cavalry surrounded the fort like a sea of steel and sweat. The enemy's shouts carried over the wind, a cacophony of threats and fury. Bear positioned Rosa behind the largest broken wall, his rifle steady, breath even. The first volley of gunfire shattered the fragile morning calm. Dust and blood mingled on the wind as the battle erupted in a hellfire of gunpowder and desperation. Rosa's blade found flesh and leather, each strike a battle hymn. Eli cried out, startled but unharmed, sheltered beneath a tarp by Bear's closest watch. Bear's shots rang true, the mark of a man with nothing left to lose. In the chaos, Ron's lieutenant charged, brandishing a bone-handled dagger. Bear met him halfway, the giant's raw power crashing against the warrior's seasoned speed. Steel sang, sparks flew, and muscles tensed in brutal ballet. Near the ramparts, Rosa caught a glimpse of Eli's pale and stitched hand, proof of innocence in a world draped in vengeance. The battle surged like the desert wind, unstoppable, unyielding. Bear felt pain searing as a bullet grazed his ribs. Sweat and blood blurred his vision. Yet every agonized breath fed his will. For Eli, for Rosa, for all buried under sun and sand. When the dust finally settled, Bear's gaze met Rosa's, forgiveness and promise shining through exhaustion. In a whisper, she said, "Found strength here I thought I lost." Bear nodded, voice thick, and found love. As night claimed the sky, the tiny fort stood battered but unbroken, just like them. Demons of past and present converge as the enemy regroups. Bear and Rosa prepare for the ultimate test, with the fate of the child and their love hanging in the balance. The sun rose harsh and unforgiving over the shattered remains of the old frontier town they now called Refuge. Dust swirled like ghosts over broken wagons and weathered wooden beams. Shadows of battles past etched in every fallen nail and scarred crossbeam. Bear Dalton nursed his wounds where the crumbling adobe walls offered scant shelter. His leg throbbed beneath the dust-streaked bandage, but it was the burn in his chest, not physical but primal, that kept him alive. Hours before, they'd fought like cornered beasts among cliffs and dust, fighting not just for their lives, but for the fragile promise a child carried. Nearby, Rosa cleaned Eli's tiny hands, her touch careful and sure despite her own exhaustion and pain. The infant stirred, cheeks flushed with a new resilience. They had survived the last daylight skirmish, but every minute ticking past brought fresh dangers to their hideout. "Do you think they'll come again?" Rosa's voice was a low murmur, carrying a brittle hope. Bear met her gaze, jaw clenched. "They always do. Devils like Ronton don't give up easy. But so long as I breathe, this boy stays mine." He lifted the worn leather of his jacket sleeve, revealing raw skin marred by his latest fight. "And yours." The days blurred into a rhythm of vigilance and quiet moments. Moments of whispered confessions under endless stars. A firelight painting soft shadows across their worn faces. Bear found himself narrating tales of battles long past, of blood lost to both war and betrayal. Rosa shared stories of deserts alive with spirits, of people who survived by fire and song. Their bond deepened, not just by necessity, but by a growing tenderness neither dared name aloud. Yet beneath the strained laughter and gentle touch, the weight of the hunt pressed ever heavier. Word of the bounty was spreading. Mercenaries and gunslingers added their names to the prize. The desert was no longer silent. It whispered of impending violence. One evening, the distant rumble of hooves shattered the fragile peace. A force twice their number bore down upon the ruin. Soldiers from the fort, allied with the ruthless Ron's warriors, their faces hard as stone and eyes hungry for blood. Bear's mighty frame loomed as a bastion against despair. "Hold for me," he commanded, weapon ready. The battle unfolded with ferocity and chaos, shots echoing, men grunting, horses screaming. Rosa wielded blade with fierce grace, driving back attackers with wild fury. Bear moved like a tempest, fists and rifle in perfect harmony, each breath a testament to raw survival. Amid the melee, Eli's cries cut through the din, a desperate reminder of stakes far beyond blood and gunpowder. The tide turned with Bear's deafening roar. He tackled Ron's second-in-command, steel ringing against stone. The clash was swift and brutal, a dance of death and determination. For every man who fell, the resolve of Bear and Rosa only strengthened, love fueling endurance. As dawn broke over shattered walls and shattered lives, the survivors gathered amidst smoke and silence. Friends lost, enemies vanquished, but hearts still bruised and bodies still trembling. Bear knelt beside Rosa and Eli, bowed in silent prayer to the desert that had witnessed their fight. "We live," Rosa whispered, voice thick with awe and gratitude. "And we'll fight to the last dawn to keep it that way," Bear promised, lips brushing hers in a vow beyond words. Together, bound by blood and fire, the trio faced the horizon, a new day's promise etched into the endless sands of the Wild West. The horizon hid whispers of waiting dangers, but for now, hope rode with them as steady as Dusty's stride. The fight is far from over. A shadow looms even darker than gunfire. The true enemy revealing themselves as friend and foe blur in the desert heat. Their journey leads to a reckoning at the Devil's Needle, where past sins and future hopes collide. The morning sun poured pale light over the shattered remains of Devil's Needle. Smoke still curled from smoldering embers where the fort had been battered by gunfire and fire. The scent of burnt sage and scorched earth hung in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of blood and gunpowder. Inside the ruined walls, Bear Dalton's massive frame stood sentinel, his eyes narrowed and body coiled like a breaker horse ready to spring. Rosa paced near the makeshift bed where little Eli slept, swaddled in soft cloths. Despite exhaustion, her eyes burned bright with fierce determination. "We face 'em today," Bear said grimly. "More men than last time, more firepower. We can't let them break through." His voice rumbled like distant thunder, a promise and a warning. Rosa nodded, steadying herself against a cold gust that whipped through crumbled archways. Eli deserves a world better than this, one where fear doesn't rule every sunrise. The bonds forged in the crucible of suffering had never felt stronger. Bear's hand found Rosa's, their fingers intertwining with an unspoken oath. Yet beneath the courage lay the weight of memories, ghosts of friends lost, of betrayals and scars that marred more than flesh. As the sun reached noon, the ground trembled with approaching hooves, the army and Ron's warriors united in their relentless hunt. Shouting orders and battle cries filled the canyon, echoing like a storm released. Bear took up position behind the battered gate, Dusty planted firmly beneath him. Rifle in hand, he waited for the inevitable. The enemy advanced like a wave, relentless and brutal. Arrows splintered against stone, fireballs arced through the sky, and musket shots punctuated the air with deadly rhythm. Rosa moved among the defenders with lethal grace, blade flashing, every strike a testament to her unyielding spirit. Bear fought like a force of nature, fists and rifle singing death song. Amid the chaos, Eli's cries rose piercing above the havoc, vivid reminders of what they fought for and what could be lost. Bear locked eyes with Rosa in a brief moment's calm. She smiled, tears mingling with dust on her cheeks, a fragile declaration of hope amid carnage. But as the battle raged, an unexpected threat emerged. A squadron of mercenaries led by a man cloaked in shadows, one who knew Bear's past sins better than anyone. The fight escalated into a dance of death, a swirl of blood, grit, and determination. Bear faced the mercenary leader, each blow and counterstrike pulling closer another thread of fate. In the shadows, Rosa fought alongside Eli's protector, their bond tested and strengthened by fire and loss. The battle's crescendo burst with gunfire and screams, then silence descending like a heavy cloak. Among the ruins, Bear knelt to Eli, holding the fragile child close. Rosa covered his wounds, whispering promises of dawn and peace. The final scorched earth bore witness to survival and sacrifice. As stars claimed the darkened sky, Bear and Rosa found solace in each other's arms, their love blazing against the endless desert night. They rise with the sun, ready to face whatever frontier lies ahead. A family forged in fire, bound by unbreakable love. Eli's name echoes on the wind, a promise that even in the harshest wasteland, hope can take root. The dawn heralds a new beginning, but shadows of the past loom, threatening all they fought to build. The journey is far from over.